How humans taught aliens to honor gravity. The stars were quiet that morning. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes before sunrise, but the heavy, waiting kind. The kind that makes animals go still and birds stop singing. On Earth's orbital station, the instruments started beeping at exactly 0417. Yuna was already awake. She had been awake for hours, sitting in front of her monitoring screen, with a cold cup of coffee beside her, watching the long-range scans with tired but focused eyes. Something was coming. She had noticed the pattern 3 days ago. Small gravitational disturbances at the edge of the solar system. Subtle shifts in the background radiation. Tiny changes that most people would have ignored. But Yuna was not most people. She had spent 12 years studying the way gravity moved, the way it whispered through space like wind through tall grass. She knew when something big was pushing through it. She called her supervisor, then the station director, then the global emergency line. Nobody believed her at first. They told her to rest, to run the diagnostics again, to stop worrying. She ran the diagnostics. The results were the same. She stopped sleeping. By the time the Velthari fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and appeared in high Earth orbit, every government on the planet was awake and screaming. The fleet was enormous. 37 ships, each one shaped like a long blade with burning white engines at the back. They moved with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Their hulls were dark and smooth, reflecting the sunlight in sharp angles. They did not slow down gently. They did not ease into orbit the way a careful pilot would. They fired their engines hard, burned enormous amounts of fuel, and simply stopped, forcing their will against the pull of Earth's gravity, like a man pressing his palm flat against a rushing river. Yuna watched this from the observation deck of the station, and said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, to no one in particular, "That's a lot of wasted energy." The Velthari made contact within the hour. Their signal came through on every frequency at once, loud and clear and completely uninvited. The translation software on the station worked fast. The aliens had apparently already studied human languages during their approach, which meant they had been watching Earth for some time before showing themselves. The diplomat's name was Kale. He appeared on screen, looking tall and angular, with pale gray skin and large dark eyes that didn't blink the way human eyes did. He wore a uniform that was clearly military, decorated with markings that the station's cultural analysis software immediately flagged as symbols of high rank and achieved conquest. He looked at the camera with the calm, flat expression of someone who had done this many times before and found it mildly boring. He introduced himself. He named his people. He named his fleet. He named the 42 star systems the Velthari had already brought under their authority. He did all of this in a polite, even tone, the way a person might list their credentials before a job interview. Except the job was domination, and the interview was not really an interview at all. Then he said, "We have observed your world. You are young. Your technology is limited. Your ships are slow, and your weapons are small. We do not come to destroy you. We come to inform you that this system is now under Velthari protection." A low place, but a place. There was silence on the human side of the call for several seconds. Then Yuna leaned forward in her chair and spoke. She was not a diplomat. She was not a general or a politician or any kind of official representative of Earth. She was an orbital engineer with messy hair and a coffee stain on her sleeve, and she had been awake for 61 hours, and she was not in the mood to be spoken to like a child. "Your approach was inefficient," she said. Kale's dark eyes moved to her. He looked the way a very large man looks when a small dog barks at him. Surprised, but not worried. "Excuse me?" "Your deceleration," Yuna said. "When you entered orbit, you burned hard against the gravity well instead of using it. You wasted a significant amount of fuel." I'm estimating somewhere between 30 and 40% more than necessary for a fleet of your size entering a system with Earth's gravitational profile. There was a pause. Kale tilted his head slightly. We have powerful engines, he said. Yes, Yuna agreed, but power isn't the same as efficiency. A strong man can carry a boulder up a hill. That doesn't mean it's the smart way to move a boulder. Behind Kale, she could see other Velthari turning to look. Some of them seemed confused. One of them seemed almost amused. Kale himself showed no clear emotion, but something shifted in his posture. A tiny stiffening, the kind that happens when someone says something you weren't expecting and you haven't decided yet how to respond. You are an interesting species, he said finally. Small, fragile, you live at the bottom of a deep gravity well, and you have clearly spent a great deal of time thinking about it. We have, Yuna said, about 6,000 years, give or take. Kale looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, Your gravity well is unusually dense for a world of your size. It must have made your early space travel very difficult. It did, Yuna said. It nearly stopped us entirely. We lost a lot of people learning how to get off this planet. A lot of machines, a lot of money, a lot of time. But we learned. We had to. You can't ignore gravity. You can't bully it. You can't just burn your engines harder and pretend it isn't there. She paused. Well, you can, but you'll run out of fuel long before gravity runs out of patience. Kale was quiet again. This quiet felt different from the first one. Less dismissive. What exactly are you suggesting? He asked. Nothing yet, Yuna said. I'm just making an observation. You came a very long way to tell us you're in charge. That's fine. But if you're going to be in charge of this system, you should probably understand it. And right now, looking at how your fleet moves, I don't think you do. It was not a threat. It was not a challenge. It was said in the same calm, factual tone that Yuna used when she explained orbital decay to new engineers on their first week at the station. But it landed in the room like something heavy dropped from a height. Kale looked at her for a long time after that. He did not laugh. He did not dismiss her. He said, We will speak again, and cut the transmission. Yuna leaned back in her chair. She picked up her cold coffee and took a sip. Around her, the other station crew were staring at her with wide eyes, some of them pale, some of them open-mouthed. She set the cup down and looked back at her screen. Someone get me the full trajectory data on their fleet, she said. I want to see exactly how they got here. Outside the observation window, 37 alien ships sat in orbit above the blue Earth, burning fuel to stay still, fighting gravity the only way they knew how. Yuna was already thinking of a better way. How humans taught aliens to honor gravity. 3 days passed before the Velthari made contact again. During those 3 days, the world below the orbital station did not sleep. Governments held emergency meetings. Militaries went to their highest alert levels. News channels ran the same footage of the Velthari fleet on a loop, hour after hour, switching between experts who argued loudly about what it all meant. People in cities stood outside at night and looked up at the sky, knowing the ships were up there even if they couldn't see them. 37 dark blades sitting in orbit, patient and still, like a hand hovering just above a table before it slams down. On the station, Yuna barely moved from her desk. She had requested the full approach trajectory data on the Velthari fleet, and spent 2 days going through it line by line. What she found was fascinating, and in a strange way, a little sad. The Velthari ships were extraordinary machines, powerful reactors, advanced hull materials, faster-than-light drives that human engineers would have given almost anything to study up close. But the way they flew was rough, blunt, like watching a master sculptor try to open a locked door by smashing it with the statue he just finished carving. Every maneuver was powered by pure engine output. Every change in speed, every adjustment in direction, every moment of resistance against any gravitational body they passed, all of it done by burning fuel. They had clearly developed their engine technology to such an extreme level that they never needed to think about anything else. Gravity was just an inconvenience to them, something to be overpowered. They had never learned to use it. Yuna kept thinking about why. She pulled up what records existed about the Velthari homeworld. Low gravity, small star with a weak pull. A solar system with few large planets and no gas giants. No Jupiter, no Saturn, no massive gravitational anchors spinning slowly in the dark. The Velthari had grown up in a system where gravity was a minor feature of the landscape, like a slow hill rather than a cliff. Of course, they had never learned to work with it. They had never needed to. Their universe had not demanded it of them. Earth's universe had demanded it of humans from the very first moment a human looked up. The third day, Kale called again. This time he did not look bored. He looked, Yuna thought, like a man who had spent 2 days in a room with people arguing, and had eventually decided to go find the one person who said something worth thinking about. A Velthari she hadn't seen before, shorter than Kale, with the same pale gray skin, but sharper features, and a pair of small devices hooked over both ears, the kind of equipment she associated with scientists rather than soldiers. "This is Darrow," Kale said. "He commands the technical division of our fleet." Darrow looked at Yuna with open curiosity, where Kale's attention felt like the attention of a man measuring a wall to see if it was worth knocking down. Darrow's attention felt like someone who had just found an unusual rock and genuinely wanted to know what it was made of. "You made a comment about our approach efficiency," Darrow said. No greeting, no diplomatic preamble, straight to the point. Yuna immediately liked him more than Kale. "I did," she said. "I reviewed our approach data after your comment," Darrow said. "We used approximately 36.4% more fuel than a minimum energy approach would have required." He paused. "How did you calculate that figure so quickly? You had no access to our ship specifications." "I didn't need them," Yuna said. "I could see the exhaust output from your engines in our long-range scans. From that, I could estimate your thrust levels. Combined with the gravitational data for this system, the math wasn't difficult." Darrow stared at her. "You read our engine output from passive observation scans?" "Yes." "And calculated our fuel efficiency?" "Roughly. I could be off by a few percent." There was a silence. Behind Darrow, Kale's expression was unreadable, but his eyes had moved to the side in the way eyes do when a mind is working on something. Darrow said, "Our people have never needed to conserve fuel in the way you describe. Our reactors are very large." "Large reactors still run out eventually," Yuna said. "Eventually," Darrow agreed, "but we have not encountered a situation where efficiency was a survival factor. We simply carry more fuel." "That works until it doesn't," Yuna said. She pulled up a diagram on her screen and turned it toward the camera. A simple map of their solar system, with colored lines showing 2 possible routes between Earth and Jupiter. One was a straight burn, direct and fast. The other was a long looping curve. "The red line is your way, maximum engine output, direct route, fast arrival. The blue line takes longer on a clock, but uses a fraction of the fuel. It rides the gravity fields of the inner planets and lets orbital mechanics do most of the work." Darrow leaned forward. Kale leaned forward too, though he seemed to do it without deciding to. "The curved path is longer," Darrow said. "In distance and in some cases in travel time, yes. But in fuel cost, it's nowhere close. This is how we launch interplanetary probes. This is how we move cargo across the system. We can't afford to just burn hard in a straight line every time we want to go somewhere. Our engines are small. Our fuel is limited. So we learn to cheat." She smiled slightly. "We borrow energy from gravity instead of fighting it." There was a long silence on the Velthari side. Then Darrow said something to Kale in their own language. Kale replied. Darrow said something else, faster. Kale held up a hand to stop him. Kale looked back at Yuna. You are saying, he said slowly, that your weakness, your small engines, your limited fuel, actually forced you to understand something that our strength allowed us to ignore. That's one way to put it, Yuna said. Kale was quiet for another moment. Then he said something that surprised her. I want to see it done, he said. Not explained, demonstrated. I want to see a human ship fly using this method. I want to watch the numbers. Yuna raised an eyebrow. You want a demonstration. A race, Kale said. Your pilot against one of ours. Same origin point, same destination. We will fly our way. Your pilot will fly your way. We will see whose method arrives first and at what fuel cost. He paused. If your method is superior, I will listen to everything you have to say. If ours is superior, you will listen to everything I have to say about your future under Valthari authority. Yuna looked at him for a moment. The Valthari ship behind Kale continued to burn fuel, holding its position in orbit through pure engine power. She could see the faint light of its exhaust thrusters through the observation window, working constantly, endlessly, fighting the pull of Earth, without ever once thinking of using it. Agreed, she said. She already knew who she was going to call to fly for them. There was only one person she trusted to do this right. Someone who had grown up thinking about orbital mechanics, the same way other people think about breathing. Someone who would not try to race the Valtari at their own game, but would instead play a completely different game entirely. She picked up her communicator and called Inho. He picked up on the second ring. There's a race, she said. Against aliens, in space, using a gravitational slingshot route through the outer system. There was a short pause. When? He said. 4 days. What's the prize? Possibly the future of the entire human race. Another pause, shorter this time. I'll need access to a Type 7 orbital courier and the full planetary ephemeris data for the next 30 days, he said. Done. Outside, the Valthari fleet burned and burned, holding itself in place through strength alone, completely unaware that strength, in this case, was the wrong answer. The right answer was patience and mathematics, and 6,000 years of learning to fall in exactly the right direction. How humans taught aliens to honor gravity. Inho arrived at the station on the second day, carrying a small bag, a battered notebook full of handwritten calculations, and the calm, unhurried manner of a man who had never once in his life panicked about anything. He was not tall. He was not impressive to look at. He had a round, quiet face, short dark hair, and the particular kind of stillness that comes from spending a lot of time alone in small spacecraft, watching numbers scroll across screens. He had been flying orbital routes since he was 22 years old. Cargo runs, survey missions, a long-range probe delivery to the outer system that had taken 14 months and left him comfortable with silence in a way few people ever become. He was 38 now, and there was not a single major gravitational body in the solar system whose pull he did not understand on a personal, practical level. He shook Yuna's hand, dropped his bag in the corner of her office, and sat down at her desk without being invited. He picked up the nearest printout, the solar system ephemeris data she had already prepared, and started reading. You want me to race them to Saturn's L4 point? He said, not looking up. That was the agreed destination, Yuna said. Neutral ground, far enough out to make the fuel difference obvious. Their ship, heavy cruiser, modified for speed, they've been very clear about that. Darrow told us it's one of the fastest vessels in their fleet. She paused. In a straight-line burn, they'll beat us easily. Their engine output is about 4 times what the Type 7 courier can produce. In a straight-line burn, Inho said, in the tone of someone pointing out that a fish in a tree would also perform poorly. Yes. He went back to his reading. Yuna watched him for a moment. You're not worried? No. Their ship is faster. Their ship is faster in the way a thrown rock is fast, Inho said. Straight, hard, simple. But we're not throwing rocks. He turned a page. What's the current position of Jupiter relative to the inner system? She told him. He wrote something in his notebook. The Velthari had given them 4 days to prepare. Inho spent all 4 of them at the desk, barely sleeping, working through trajectory calculations by hand first, and then running them through the station's navigation computers to verify. He was not calculating a race route. He was calculating a dance. A precise multi-step sequence in which the human ship would fall toward one planet, gather speed from its gravity, swing around it at exactly the right angle, then fall toward the next one, and do it again, each time gaining velocity without burning a drop of fuel. The route would look strange on a map. It would look like a mistake, or a joke. It would loop out wide from the direct path, and curve in long arcs that made no sense to anyone who thought about space travel in terms of straight lines. It made perfect sense to anyone who thought about space travel the way gravity does. On the morning of the race, the 2 ships sat at the same starting point, 50,000 kilometers above Earth's North Pole. Side by side, the difference was obvious. The Velthari cruiser was long and powerful, its engines already glowing, restless, and hungry. The Type 7 Courier was small and plain, a workhorse vehicle designed for practicality rather than speed, with modest engines that were currently not even lit. Kale and Darrow watched from the Velthari command ship. Yuna watched from the station. All 3 of them had access to the same telemetry feed. Speed, position, heading, fuel consumption, streaming in real time from both vessels. Kale had made a point of confirming, twice, that the fuel gauges would be included in the data. He wanted to see the consumption numbers. He wanted to watch the human ship burn through its small fuel reserves trying to keep up. The signal was given. The Velthari cruiser ignited with a flash that was visible from the station's windows. Its engines threw out a column of white-hot exhaust, and it surged forward, accelerating hard on a direct line toward Saturn's L4 point. Within 90 seconds, it was already thousands of kilometers ahead of the human ship, pulling away fast, its speed climbing steeply as it burned. Inho ignited his engines too, modest, quiet, gentle. He did not accelerate toward the destination at all. He turned toward Earth. On the telemetry feed at the station, one of the junior engineers made a noise of confusion. He's going the wrong way. Yuna did not respond. Inho dropped the courier into a low, precise arc toward Earth, not to land, but to use. He came in close enough that the thin upper layer of the atmosphere was just barely beneath him, and at exactly the right moment, at the exact point in his trajectory where the math said he had to be, he fired his small engines for a short, careful burn. The combination of Earth's gravity and his own thrust threw the ship outward with far more speed than his engines alone could have given him. It was like a ball on a string. Let it fall toward the center, then release at the perfect angle, and it flies out fast and free. He was already moving faster than his engines should have allowed. He swung wide, curving out past the moon, then turned again, this time toward Venus. Venus was currently positioned almost perfectly for what he needed. He fell toward it, using its gravity the same way, and when he came out the other side he was moving faster still, now aimed on a long, sweeping arc toward Jupiter. On the telemetry screen, the speed numbers next to the human ship were climbing in a way that didn't match the fuel consumption numbers. The fuel gauge was barely moving. The speed gauge kept rising. At the Velthari command ship, Darrow was staring at the numbers in silence. Kale said nothing at all. Jupiter was the big one, the king of the solar system, massive and generous with its gravity. Inho fell toward it on a perfectly calculated approach, not the close side, not the far side, but a specific angle that the Velthari could not have calculated without understanding exactly what he was doing and why. He came around Jupiter's leading edge at a speed that should have been impossible for a ship of his size, and the giant planet flung him outward like a god throwing a stone. He was now moving at a velocity that the Velthari cruiser, still burning hard on its straight-line course, had only just reached, except the Velthari cruiser had burned most of its fuel reserves to get there. The courier's fuel gauge had barely moved. Inho checked his figures one last time. He made a tiny course correction, a 3-second engine burn, barely worth noting, and then shut his engines off entirely. Falling in exactly the right direction, at exactly the right speed, aimed at Saturn's L4 point like a stone dropped from the perfect height. He arrived 4 hours and 17 minutes ahead of the Velthari cruiser. When the race was officially logged and the telemetry data was sent to both sides, the numbers were simple and clear. The Velthari cruiser had burned 91% of its fuel. The human courier had burned 11%. The human ship had traveled a longer path in terms of raw distance, and had still arrived first. Inho sat in his cockpit, in the quiet dark of the outer solar system, and ate a sandwich he had packed before the race, listening to the faint background hiss of space on his instruments. He was not celebrating. He did not feel the need to. He had just gone for a drive, a long, careful drive, on roads that most people couldn't see. Back at the station, Yuna was watching the communication screen. She was waiting. It took Kale 11 minutes to call. When his face appeared on screen, it was different from before. Not broken, not defeated, but different. The flatness was still there, but underneath it now was something that had not been there in the first conversation, or the second. It looked very much like the beginning of respect. "Your pilot did not race us," Kale said. "He flew a completely different route." "Yes," Yuna said. "He used the planets." "Yes." Kale was quiet for a moment. "In 40 years of fleet command, I have never seen a ship that small move that fast on that little fuel." "It's not about the ship," Yuna said quietly. "It's about the road." There was a long pause. Then Kale said, slowly, carefully, like someone saying something they had never said to anyone outside their own people. "I think we have more to discuss." Yuna nodded. Outside the observation window, the stars were still. Not the heavy waiting kind of still this time. Something else. The kind of quiet that comes after something changes. The kind that follows the moment when two completely different minds, shaped by completely different worlds, finally look at each other and see something worth learning. How humans taught aliens to honor gravity. 2 months after the race, Sori was alone on a research outpost at the edge of the Kareth binary system, eating cold noodles and arguing with her navigation computer. She was a small woman with short hair that she cut herself and wire-rimmed glasses that she wore even though corrective surgery had been available for decades. She simply liked how they felt on her face. She had been stationed at Outpost Kareth 7 for 11 months, studying the gravitational interaction between Kareth A and Kareth B, the two stars that orbited each other at the center of the system, like two enormous slow-dancing partners. Nobody else wanted this posting. It was far from Earth, far from anything interesting, and the stars themselves, while scientifically fascinating, did not do anything dramatic. They just pulled at each other, endlessly, in long, complicated loops. She had notebooks full of calculations about the way their combined gravity fields overlapped and shifted, the invisible geography of force that ran through the entire system. She knew where the stable zones were, where the dangerous zones were, and where the zones were that looked stable, but weren't. Places where the combined pull of two stars could grab a ship that wandered too deep and refuse to let it go. She had been trying to explain this to her navigation computer for 3 days, because the computer's standard charts did not account for the dynamic nature of binary gravitational fields, and kept insisting that certain areas of the system were safe, when Sori's own calculations said they absolutely were not. She was mid-argument, noodles halfway to her mouth, when the long-range scanner lit up. 37 ships. She recognized the profile immediately. The Velthari fleet had been in the news constantly since their arrival at Earth, and the images of their blade-shaped vessels were everywhere. She had watched the footage of the race from her outpost, cheering quietly alone in her little control room, deeply satisfied in the way that only someone who spends their life thinking about orbital mechanics can be satisfied when orbital mechanics win a race. But the fleet should not have been in the Karath system. Not now. Not at this time of year. She checked her calculations. Then she checked them again. Then she stood up from her chair very slowly and put her noodles down. The Velthari fleet had entered the Karath binary system on a standard approach vector, a straight-line course designed to take them through the system at high speed. It was, according to every standard chart available, a safe corridor. Sori's own research, which was sitting in a report that she had filed 8 months ago and which had not yet been reviewed by anyone at the relevant scientific body, said that corridor was about to become extremely unsafe. Every 18 months, the orbital relationship between Karath A and Karath B reached a specific alignment phase. During this phase, the overlapping gravitational fields of the two stars created a region of shifting, unpredictable pull, a zone where the forces that acted on a ship could change direction suddenly and without warning. It was not violent. It did not tear ships apart. It was subtler and more dangerous than that. It was a zone where a ship might find itself being pulled in 3 different directions at once, its trajectory slowly curving away from any intended destination, its engines working harder and harder against forces that never showed up cleanly on standard instruments, because they were not a single pull, but a combination of pulls that shifted as the stars moved. The Velthari fleet had 12 minutes before they entered that zone. Sori did not hesitate. She was not a dramatic person. She did not stand at her window and watch the ships approach in horror. She sat back down, pulled up her emergency broadcast system, and started transmitting. This is Outpost Karath 7. I am a human researcher, Dr. Sori, station number KR7004. I am broadcasting on all Velthari fleet frequencies. Please respond immediately. You are approaching a gravitational interference zone. I repeat, you are approaching a gravitational interference zone that is not marked on standard charts. Please alter your course. There was no response for 40 seconds. Then a voice came back, flat and slightly irritated, speaking in translated standard. Human outpost. We are aware of your location. We have filed approach documentation for this system. Our route is pre-cleared. Please do not interrupt fleet communications with unnecessary broadcasts. Sori recognized the voice. Not Kale. Not Daro. Someone else. Someone who had not been part of the conversations at Earth. Someone who did not know anything about the race or the human engineer who had first challenged the fleet's approach efficiency. She took a breath. I understand your route is pre-cleared, she said. The clearance was based on standard charts. Those charts do not account for phase shift dynamics in binary gravitational systems. I have 11 months of observational data on this specific system. In approximately 10 minutes, you will enter a zone where the combined gravitational output of both stars will begin to interact with your ships in ways that your instruments may not correctly identify. If you attempt to correct your course inside that zone using standard engine burns, you will make the situation worse, not better. Our instruments are functioning normally. They will continue to function normally, Sori said. That's the problem. The interference I am describing does not show up as an alert. It shows up as a slight increase in required engine thrust to maintain heading. It will feel like engine inefficiency at first. Your pilots will increase power output. The increased output will push you deeper into the overlapping field. The deeper you go, the more power you need. You will burn through your fuel reserves trying to hold a course that is being actively moved by forces your standard navigation system does not model correctly. Another pause, longer this time. You are describing a situation our fleet engineering team has no record of encountering. No, Story said, because you have probably never flown through a binary system during a phase shift alignment. Most ships don't. The window is narrow, and the system is remote. She was already pulling up her pre-calculated escape trajectories on her second screen. Routes she had worked out months ago, not for any emergency, but because she was the kind of person who worked out escape trajectories for hypothetical situations because she found it interesting. I have 3 possible rescue trajectories ready. Each one uses the gravitational field to push you out of the danger zone, rather than trying to fight through it. The routes look counterintuitive. You will feel, at first, like you are going deeper into the system rather than out of it. I need you to trust the math. There was a very long silence. Then a different voice came on. This one she recognized. Dr. Story. It was Darrow. She felt a wave of relief that she did not show in her voice. Commander Darrow. I am looking at your outpost's published research files. You filed a gravitational phase shift analysis for this system 8 months ago. A pause. Our navigation team is telling me your warning is unnecessary. My own instinct is telling me to listen to you. I would appreciate your honest assessment of how serious this situation is. Story looked at her screens. The fleet was still on course. 8 minutes now. In 8 minutes, your fleet will begin to feel the effects. In approximately 40 minutes, if you continue on your current course with standard engine response, you will have burned enough fuel attempting to correct your heading that several of your ships will not have enough reserves to exit the system under their own power. At that point, the only way out would be a free-fall trajectory that takes approximately 19 days. You would survive, but you would be stranded. 40,000 crew, Darrow said quietly. Yes, Story said. Send me the trajectories. She sent them. All 3, with full supporting calculations, formatted as simply as she could manage in the time available. She watched on her scanner as the fleet data updated. Navigators on Velthari ships were opening her files, running them through their own systems. She could imagine the arguments happening on those ships right now. She could imagine the navigation officers looking at her proposed routes and feeling what any pilot feels when told to fly towards something dangerous on the promise that it will eventually swing you away from it. The wrongness of it, in the gut. 6 minutes, the first trajectory, Darrow said, the one that curves toward Karath A before swinging out. This takes us closer to the primary star before it redirects us away. Yes. That seems like the wrong direction. It is the wrong direction, Story said, for about 4 minutes. Then the primary's gravitational gradient shifts, and it becomes the right direction. The route only works if you commit to it completely. If you turn back halfway through, you will be in a worse position than if you had stayed on your original course. A silence. 5 minutes. All ships, Darrow said, not to her, but to his fleet, alter course to the coordinates just received from Outpost Karath 7. Maintain the plotted trajectory. Do not deviate. All pilots, reduce engine output to the minimum level required to hold the programmed heading. Do not attempt manual corrections unless I authorize them. Story watched her scanner. 37 ships changed course. They turned toward Karath A, toward the blazing heart of the bigger star, and for 4 minutes, everything looked wrong. Her instruments tracked the gravitational forces acting on the fleet, and she watched the numbers with the careful attention of someone disarming something very delicate. She could feel, even from a distance, how wrong it must have felt in those cockpits. Engines straining, instruments showing increasing pull, every instinct in every pilot screaming to push harder, burn more, get away. Nobody deviated. At the 4-minute mark, the gradient shifted exactly as her calculations said it would, and the combined field of the 2 stars stopped pulling the fleet inward and began gently, then firmly, then strongly, pushing them out. Ship after ship curved away from the danger zone, picking up speed as the gravity of two suns worked together to throw them clear, fuel consumption dropping, headings stabilizing, the crisis dissolving into open space and clean trajectories. The whole fleet was clear in 18 minutes. Darrow's voice came back on the channel, quiet and careful. Fuel reserves across the fleet are at an average of 78%. Under our original course and standard response, your projection was approximately 30 to 35% across the fleet, Story said. Possibly lower for the ships in the middle of the formation, where the field interaction would have been strongest. A long pause. You saved 40,000 lives, Darrow said. I saved 40,000 lives and a lot of fuel, Story said. She picked up her cold noodles. Someone should probably read my research report. It's been sitting in the review queue for 8 months. There was a sound from Darrow's end that might, in a human, have been a very quiet laugh. Story turned back to her window. The two stars of the Karat system continued their endless slow dance, pulling at each other across millions of kilometers, shaping the invisible landscape of the space between them. She knew every curve of their influence, every subtle shift, every place where their combined will pressed down on the fabric of the system, like two hands pressing different sides of the same piece of cloth. Gravity, she had always believed, was not an enemy. It was not a force to be fought or ignored or overpowered. It was information. It was the universe writing itself in the language of mass and distance and time. If you learned to read it, it would tell you everything you needed to know. She finished her noodles, made a note in her log, and went back to arguing with her navigation computer. H1. How Humans Taught Aliens to Honor Gravity. HR. 6 months after the Karath incident, Kale came back to Earth. He came without the fleet this time. He came in a single ship, a mid-sized vessel, nothing military about it, the Velthari equivalent of a transport shuttle. He entered Earth's orbit slowly, on a careful, curving approach that was nothing like the hard-burning arrival of 6 months ago. It was not perfect. It was not elegant, but it was deliberate, and it used the moon's gravity to shed speed rather than the ship's own engines. And that small thing, that single, careful, imperfect attempt to do it the human way, said more than any formal diplomatic message could have. Yuna watched the approach data on her screen and allowed herself one small smile before she went to meet him. They sat together in the station's main conference room, just the two of them, with a window that looked out on the curve of the Earth below, blue and white and deeply, quietly present. Kale looked different. Not smaller, not softer, but something in him had settled. The measuring quality, the way he used to look at things, as though calculating their resistance, had given way to something more like attention, like listening. He did not start with politics. He did not start with the Galactic Assembly, or Velthari Authority, or Earth's place in any hierarchy. He looked at the planet below for a long time, and then he said, I come from a world where the sky is easy. Yuna waited. Our star is gentle, he continued. Our planet is light. We looked up from the beginning and saw space as something that simply existed above us, available, not particularly dangerous. We built engines, and we flew. The flying was hard, but it was the normal kind of hard, the kind that strength and intelligence and fuel can solve. He paused. We never had to learn to fall the right way. We never had to learn to listen to what the universe was doing and work with it, rather than against it. Your home sounds peaceful, Yuna said. It is, Kale agreed, and it made us certain. Certainty is comfortable, but it narrows the mind. He turned from the window to look at her. On 42 worlds, we have made contact. Some were afraid of us. Most accepted our authority quickly, because we are strong, and they were not ready to challenge that. None of them taught us anything. You seem bothered by that, Yuna said. I've been thinking about it a great deal since the race, Kale said. And since Karath. He folded his hands on the table. His hands were long and pale gray, the fingers arranged differently from a human's. But the gesture was familiar, the gesture of a person organizing their thoughts. When Darrow told me what Dr. Sori did, that she had 11 months of research sitting in an unread report that saved 40,000 lives, I tried to imagine what would have happened if we had not been in this system, in your solar system, at this moment, if we had passed through Karath on a different mission, if none of your people had been on that outpost. Yuna nodded slowly. You would have learned a very hard lesson by yourself. Or we would not have survived to learn it at all. The middle ships in our formation. Darrow's own analysis said they would have been the most affected. His ship was in the middle. He looked at her steadily. I have given Darrow an official commendation for the decision he made to listen to your researchers' warning rather than his own navigation team. His navigation team was furious. They felt their professional judgment was being overruled by an unknown human in a remote outpost. He paused. Were they wrong to feel that way? They were wrong to trust certainty over evidence, Kale said. That is what I told them. They had the charts. Dr. Sori had 11 months of observation from inside the system itself. Charts are made by people who were somewhere else at a different time. Observation is made by someone who is here and paying attention. He paused. Your people have a saying, I was told. Something about the map. The map is not the territory, Yuna said. Yes, that. Kale seemed to turn the phrase over in his mind. We have no equivalent saying. I think we should. They were quiet together for a moment. Below them, Earth turned slowly, patient and enormous, its gravity holding everything, the ocean, the air, the people, the stories of 6,000 years of hard-won understanding, close and safe and uncompromising. Yuna thought about what she wanted to say next. She had been thinking about it for weeks, since she had first heard through diplomatic channels that Kale was planning this visit. She had prepared nothing, because she had learned long ago that prepared speeches drift away from the truth, and what she wanted to say required her to be close to the truth. Can I ask you something? She said. Please, Kale said. When you came the first time, 6 months ago with the fleet, to tell us we were going to be under your authority, did you think about what you might learn from us, or only what we would learn from you? A truthful quiet, not a diplomatic one. I thought we would find a young species, he said, with something to offer as workers, perhaps, as population, raw materials and new territory. I did not expect to find teachers. He looked at her directly. I did not believe when I first saw your small, fragile world at the bottom of its deep gravity well that you had anything to teach anyone. I thought your gravity was a disadvantage, something that had held you back. It did hold us back, Yuna said, for a very long time. And then it became the thing that pushed us forward, because we had no choice but to understand it. Constraint as education, Kale said. Something like that. He nodded slowly. The Galactic Assembly has 47 member civilizations. 11 of them evolved in low-gravity environments, similar to ours. The remaining 36 evolved on heavier worlds. He paused. I reviewed their travel and navigation histories after the race. The heavier world civilizations all show similar patterns to your own. More efficient flight paths, more sophisticated gravitational modeling, earlier development of slingshot and orbital transfer techniques. The lighter world civilizations, including the Velthari, all show the same pattern we showed you. More fuel use, less orbital sophistication, more reliance on engine power. Nobody ever pointed that out before? Yuna asked. Nobody ever had reason to compare, Kale said. We all arrived at interstellar travel eventually. We all met each other. The gap in approach efficiency was noticeable, but it did not seem important. Space is large. Fuel, while not unlimited, has never been a crisis for any of the Assembly's members. But that is because none of the Assembly's members has ever had to cross the kind of distance or manage the kind of complex multi-body gravitational environment that a deep space war, or a true crisis, or a genuinely long-range exploration mission would require. Yuna understood where this was going. You're thinking ahead. I am thinking about what happens when we eventually reach the regions of space that are genuinely difficult, Kale said. When we are not moving between nearby systems with simple gravitational profiles, but pushing into the deep interior of the galaxy, where the star density is higher, where multi-body interactions are constant, where the navigational environment is not simple at all. He paused. I would like the Velthari fleet, and perhaps all the fleets of the Assembly, to know how to fly the way Inho flew. The way that does not waste, the way that listens. Yuna was quiet for a moment. She looked at the planet below. She thought of Inho, currently back on a routine cargo run, and probably completely unbothered about having changed interstellar history. She thought of Sori, still in her outpost, still arguing with her navigation computer, still filling notebooks with calculations about two stars circling each other. She thought of all the engineers and physicists and pilots over all the years who had learned, the hard way, that the universe does not reward the strongest engine. It rewards the one who understands the road. What exactly are you asking for? She said. A formal exchange, Kale said. Human navigators and gravitational physicists working alongside Velthari and Assembly, engineers and pilots. Not to give us your technology, not a transfer of equipment or ships, an education. The knowledge that lives in your people. The knowledge that your heavy world and your difficult sky put there. Yuna thought about it for less time than Kale probably expected. Yes, she said, but with one condition. Name it. The knowledge goes both directions. We teach you what we know about gravity. You teach us what you know about everything else. No hierarchy, no authority structure. Just people who know things, sharing with people who don't know them yet. Kale looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, very carefully, that is not how the Galactic Assembly normally functions. I know, Yuna said. Maybe it should start. Another silence. This one felt different from all the silences before it. Not heavy, not waiting, not measuring. This one felt like the moment before a door opens, a kind of held breath that is also a kind of hope. Kale said, I will bring this proposal to the Assembly Council. I will make the case myself. I should tell you that several Assembly members will resist it. The idea of learning from a species that has not yet achieved interstellar travel is not one that our culture finds natural. We know, Yuna said. We're used to that. Something shifted in Kale's expression. Not a smile. His face did not arrange itself the way a human face does. But something that served the same purpose. A recognition, an acknowledgement. I will need something to show them, he said. A demonstration of principle. A name for the thing you are proposing to teach. Yuna thought about it. She looked out the window at the Earth, at the gravity well that had made her people work so hard and understand so much. The deep, patient, unyielding pull of a world that had given humanity no choice but to learn the shape of the universe from the inside out. Call it orbital wisdom, she said quietly. It's just the practice of listening to what gravity is already telling you. Learning to move with it, rather than against it. Trusting the path that the universe has already laid out, even when it looks like the wrong direction. Kale repeated the phrase slowly, carefully, in his own language. Whatever the Velthari word for it was, it seemed to fit. He nodded once, with the finality of a man making a decision. 2 months later, the Galactic Assembly, 47 civilizations, 11 of them the large-engined, fuel-burning descendants of light-gravity worlds, formally admitted humanity as a member. Not as workers, not as a subject species, not even as a curiosity, as teachers. The resolution that accompanied the admission describes humanity as a civilization uniquely shaped by gravitational constraint into a deep understanding of orbital mechanics and multi-body dynamics, whose knowledge represents a gap in assembly scientific tradition that warrants immediate and serious study. Inho read it on a cargo run and shrugged. Sori read it in her outpost and made a note in her log and went back to her calculations. Yuna read it on the station, looked out at the earth below, and thought about the 6,000 years of people who had looked up at a heavy sky and learned, slowly and painfully and brilliantly, how to fall in exactly the right direction. She thought about all the things that had seemed like disadvantages: the deep gravity, the limited fuel, the small engines, the long hard centuries of reaching upward against something that never stopped pulling back. And she thought about how all of it, every single hard thing, had made her people what they were. She thought, the universe doesn't reward the strongest engine, it rewards the one who listens to the road. And the road, patient and ancient and never in any hurry, continued to curve in all the right directions through the dark between the stars.